Hey everybody, this is Neil Pasricha, and welcome back to chapter 97 of 3 books. If you are new here, thanks for joining us. Thanks for popping in. I was going to say, when you start a podcast, there isn't that satisfying click. That's kind of why we put the satisfying click at the start of the theme song. Well, thanks for satisfyingly clicking the 3 Books podcast logo on your podcatcher device of choice. You have joined our epic, nearly 15-year-long pilgrimage to count down the 1,000 formative books in the world. How are we doing that? Well, we are talking to 333 of the most inspiring people in the world, like Chapter 3, Seth Godin, Chapter 37, Malcolm Gladwell, Chapter 63, Brandon Stanton, Chapter 69, Cheryl Strayed, Chapter 70, Brené Brown. Why did I pick those 5 people particularly? Well, because they are all overlapping guests with another podcast that you might have heard about called Design Matters. Are you a big, long-time, kind of passionate, hardcore fan of Design Matters like I am? This is a podcast that has been running for 18 years. Just to put that in perspective, the Apple iPhone, has only been a thing for 15 years. So this was a podcast before the iPhone. It was a podcast when there was just the iPod. The portmanteau podcast is a combination of 2 words, iPod and broadcast. So if you were listening to broadcasts on your iPod, one of the very first podcasts you might be listening to or had listened to is Design Matters. Design Matters is Debbie Millman scratching at her own insatiable curiosity to explore amongst the world's biggest names in design, in the broadest sense of the word, what it means to live a rich, fulfilling, intentional life. In a way, I kind of feel like I'm doing something similar, parallel to Debbie over here on 3 Books. Maybe we're 2 kind of podcasts in the same giant ocean, swimming along in the same way. You got a host, that's me, that's Debbie, wanting to figure things out, and they're wanting to figure things out, so they invite people on the show. That's what we're doing, that's what Debbie's doing. Well, what is the story of Debbie Millman? Who is Debbie Millman? How do we get into detail on who Debbie Millman is? I don't know where to start. She's one of the most creative people in business, says Fast Company. She's one of the most influential designers working in the world today, says Graphic Design USA. Okay. The podcast, Design Matters, has just been turned into an incredible hardcover book that I'm holding here. I'm knocking on the cover, called Why Design Matters, Conversations with the World's Most Creative People, by Debbie Millman, forward by Roxane Gay, our guest in Chapter 67, and Debbie's wife. You're going to hear more about that in this show. Our first ever married couple, I believe, appearing on 3 Books, if you don't count Leslie and I. Okay, second ever married couple on the show. Introduction by Tim Ferriss. Oh, this is a giant, heavy, amazing tome, put out, of course, by Harper Design, comes out on February 22nd. So if you're looking up to the moon and you're like, hey, it's not waxing, it's not waning, Neil, we're at the snow moon today, right? That's what it is. That's the full moon. We drop every single chapter of 3 Books on the exact minute of every single new moon and every single full moon, all the way up to September 1st, 2031. Well, for 5 days from now until February 22nd, her book's not available, but then on February 22nd, it's available from then until the end of the podcast, and you absolutely need to pick it up. It is a compressed set of wisdom and values of all the knowledge shared on her program, Design Matters, into this book. Debbie is the author of 7 other books, including How to Think Like a Graphic Designer, Brand Thinking, and Other Noble Pursuits. She co-founded the world's first graduate program in branding at the School of Visual Arts back in 2010. For 20 years before that, she was the president of Sterling Brands, one of the world's leading branding consulting agencies. What did she do there? No big deal. She helped design brand identities and logos for Star Wars, Burger King, Haagen-Dazs, Gillette, and even the No More movement. No More movement. Is she an activist? She sure is. She's also working with the Joyful Heart Foundation to eradicate sexual assault, domestic violence, child abuse, and the rape kit backlog. Does she contain multitudes or what? Is Debbie Millman fascinating or what? It is a pleasure and a privilege to have Debbie Millman on 3 Books talking about how you avoid limiting possibilities, why regret cannot be metabolized, why you should be public about your shame, potentially, what makes a great interview, and of course, what are the incredible Debbie Millman's 3 most formative books. Let's jump into Chapter 97, now. Okay, I just pressed record. Hi, Debbie.
Hello, Neil.
Thank you so much for coming on 3 Books. I'm so grateful to you.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. I'm a fan and truly thrilled.
Wait a minute. I am intimidated. I'm interviewing one of the best interviewers in the world. So I thought we might kick it off by just saying, what makes a great interview to you?
Well, first, a great guest, without a doubt.
Can we check on that one?
I think as well, perhaps a willingness to talk and a curiosity about where I might go and the trust to let me take someone there.
I like that. A curiosity about where I might go and the trust for someone to take you there. You know, your research skills are very well known. I spoke briefly over email to Roxane before speaking to you today, and she said it's really phenomenal. You know, Debbie will read almost every single thing a person has written in order to prepare for them. And she's mentioned before that you work kind of 25/8, I think she called it. And I was just curious, like, that research philosophy is really impressive. But if you had like 12 hours, let me just give you a hypothetical, and you had to prepare for someone who has way more written about them and by them than you could possibly ever read, like Barack Obama, like, how do you decide how to spend the 12 hours?
You know, it's so funny because I'm not doing any, you know, I haven't hired a private investigator or called somebody's siblings or, you know, anything like that. It's all just out there. I think I have a good eye for that kind of detail. And so when I find something like that, I tend to sense when that will either surprise somebody or delight them. And I think I just have a knack of picking well. But those things are out there. And you know, it's not even like they're just in one place that I find them. You know, they have been cited often in several places. But yeah, I just pick up on that kind of stuff.
Well, it's really amazing and a really, really big testament to the quality of your interviews. You were kind enough, Debbie, to give us even more than 3 of the most formative books of your life. And I'd love to spend the time we have together today, me giving our listeners, our 3 Books community, a little 30-second overview of each book so they can like picture holding them in their hand in a bookstore. And then I'd love to ask you to tell us about your relationship with each book. Okay, your first book is Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabrielle Garcia Marquez, published in 1985 by Editorial Oveja Negra in Colombia, and then later in 1988 by Alfred A. Knopf in English. The cover of the book, there are many, many covers of the book. The paperback I am holding is a naked woman drawn in a painting type of format with flower blossoms covering her private areas, except for actually you can see her breasts. There is a rose lying in front of her, presumably a love letter lying in front of her. She is lying backwards on a purple chaise lounge chair with a man in a dark suit, a mustache, and a black hat in the background. Love in the Time of Cholera. In their youth, Florentino Ariza and Fermina Daza fall passionately in love. When Fermina eventually chooses to marry a wealthy, well-born doctor, Florentino is heartbroken. But he is a romantic, as he rises in his business career while he whiles away the years in 622 affairs. Yet he reserves his heart for Fermina. Her husband dies at last, and Florentino purposefully attends the funeral. 50 years, 9 months, and 4 days after he first declared his love for Fermina, he will do so again. Gabrielle Garcia Marquez, often known as Gabo, was born in 1927 in Colombia, died in 2014 in Mexico City, Mexico. This is the second Gabo book we have on our top 1,000 after number 767, Innocent Arandina, that was chosen by Judy Morales back in chapter 79. Dewey Decimal Heads, you can file this one under 863 for Spanish fiction. Debbie, please tell us about your relationship with Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabo.
This is the first book, Neil, I ever cried at the end. I was sitting on a beach, which I rarely do, and can count on one hand the times that I have. I was in the Dominican Republic reading this book and was entranced by it. I mean, there's nobody that does magical realism like Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I got to the end, and I guess I am going to give some spoilers, when Fermina Daza and Florentino Ariza realize that they're going to spend the rest of their lives together on a boat going back and forth between countries that have cholera or trying to escape cholera. I just wept that, it took 50 some odd years for them to find each other in the way that they have. And it is heartbreaking. It is life-affirming. It's so beautiful and written in the way that only Gabriel Garcia Marquez can. And there I was on the beach, weeping, just weeping into this book, and feeling like this is what it meant to be alive, to have this experience with art. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget that moment and the joy that I felt while reading this book. I never wanted it to end, just as Fermina and Florentino are experiencing the sort of eternity of traveling from port to port. I felt the eternity of being connected to this book.
That is beautiful, Debbie. And, love is the first word in the title. And it was a word that you mentioned many times just in your relationship. You have very publicly found love in the last few years. I loved your conversation with Roxane and Brené about your love story and how you and Roxane fell in love. And I might ask you a question I asked her. How do people think about finding love?
Oh, Neil, I wish it were that easy to codify. I don't know that I found love. I think maybe love found me. I'm about to be 60, so the fact that this happened for me so much later in life is a gift and a joy. And I think about that every day. I have publicly said that I would think I fell in love with Roxane while reading another book that we're going to talk about, which is her book Hunger. But it was more subconscious than conscious, because I wouldn't say that I was expecting at that point to ever date her and then ultimately marry her. It was just this soul connection that I felt like, how did this person who I've never met, who doesn't even know me, how was she capable of writing my history in her own book and in her own experience? I felt like she was capturing my history and hers. And that had never happened to me before. And then when I read Bad Feminist, Hunger, it was more from a soul perspective. When I read Bad Feminist, which I read after Hunger, then it was like, oh my God, there are so many signs here. I'm a Scrabble fanatic. I'm an SVU fanatic. There were so many overlaps. I thought we're incredibly compatible.
She's not as into Wheel of Fortune, maybe, but
yeah, she's more a Jeopardy person. But I think I've won her over with my love of the wheel.
Well, what is so romantic about the very first sentence of your response is that is the same first sentence from her as well. I don't know how to find love. I think love I found me.
Really?
And so she
really?
said, I'm paraphrasing, but it was very similar to, I don't know if you can find love until love finds you. I didn't know how to love until I was well loved.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, she could say anything beautifully.
Yeah. And so there's another theme here that is sort of, I was thinking about as I was reading this book. It's about identity. The number one most popular quote from this book, according to Goodreads, is this one. He allowed himself to be swayed by his conviction that human beings are not born once and for all on the day their mothers give birth to them, but that life obliges them over and over again to give birth to themselves. And there was an old quote from you. I think you shared it with Tim. One of the things I struggled with when I moved to Manhattan was what I was going to be, what I was going to do. Today, of course, you are, in addition to the many things you do, you are a teacher. You often share advice on finding work that really matters and work that we really love. And if I may say so, you've also metamorphosized your own career many times, from a corporate kind of branding work to podcasting, to sitting on the board of charities. Like, think of that phrase, life obliges us over and over again to give birth to ourselves. How do you think about that quote in the world today? And maybe more specifically, like, what advice do you give people to be able to do that?
Oh, you have such hard questions, Neil.
I learned from you.
Oh, goodness. Well, it's hard for me to give advice because I feel that that would presume that I know what I'm doing and can sort of empirically prove my methodologies, and I really can't. I mean, the one thing that I would say is a real common denominator now in the younger students I teach, particularly the undergrads, is the notion of eliminating what's possible in their lives before they attempt to even see if it's possible. And so they already deem certain things beyond their reach and determine that they are either incapable or undeserving or not worthy. I mean, there's so many reasons that they give for being afraid to really go after what they want. And that's something that I spend a lot of time with them and coaching them to try to overcome, because if they don't overcome it at this early stage of their lives, it's very unlikely that anything's going to happen later in their lives to give them that sort of nudge to where they should be going, because there's so much more to lose as we get older, when we have families, when we have responsibilities to a mortgage or to children or to a spouse.
Yeah, we're potentially less mobile, less risk taking.
Yeah, I mean, what other time
less
is there? Less
disposable income as a percentage of income.
Yeah, how many more stages in one's life do you get where it's absolutely okay to sort of fall flat on your face with really very little ramification other than maybe a bruised ego? And so, I ask students, one of the things that I often do is share with them Dan Gilbert's TED Talk, which is The Surprising Truth About Happiness. And we talk about the way in which he describes organic happiness versus synthetic happiness. And organic happiness is when you get what you want, and synthetic happiness is when you come to appreciate what you might get that you didn't necessarily want but have. And what I've discovered is that really there's only one path to unhappiness. There's a path to happiness that includes going after what you want and getting it. Great. That's lucky. That's wonderful. We all hope for that. And then there's another path, which is to go after what you want, maybe not get exactly what you want, but because of the way human brains are organized, we begin to synthesize happiness in a current state. And then there's a third possibility, which is to not go after what you want in order to avoid unhappiness. What you're then left with is regret. And regret is not an emotion that can be metabolized. We can metabolize grief. We metabolize love. We metabolize hunger when we eat. We metabolize all sorts of things, but we don't metabolize regret because there's no closure. There's always that what if I had ... And so that awareness in and of itself begins to reorganize the way that my young students think about risk and experimenting and really taking a step into the unknown, which is what our brains try to protect us from doing, because there's no certainty in that, and our brains like certainty and security. And so once they're able to see that they can tolerate that fear, in doing so, they begin to give themselves permission to try to consider something that they really want but might be too scared to pursue.
Wow. Wow. What I love about that answer is that you have spoken to, there's a lot of disillusionment amongst younger people. It does feel overwhelming to live in the world today. And, you know, when I was a kid, you could be the best basketball player in your high school team. These days, somebody's on YouTube throwing backwards over their head shots from half court. No matter what that metaphor is for the thing you want to do, there's people 10 times better. But this is such a great logical way to explain why it's worth pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone and taking risks. I really, really appreciate that advice.
Oh, my pleasure.
And since you just said the phrase hunger can be metabolized, and you've already hinted at your second book, and we've already talked about your relationship with Roxane, maybe we now shift and move into your second most formative book, which is indeed Hunger by Roxane Gay. I am holding the white paperback in my hands right now with a very, very close macro zoom up shot of the side of a fork with those little what are the spikes called on a fork? Do you know?
Yeah, oh yeah, I have that copy. Absolutely.
Tines? Are they called tines?
Oh, what are they called? Tines. Yes, I think
tines,
they are.
Okay.
Tines, yeah.
It says hunger in like a serify, like Times New Roman type of font in the center of the book by Roxane Gay right below. In small red letters, a memoir of my, in brackets, body. At the bottom, it says author of the New York Times bestseller, Bad Feminist. The inside flap says, in this intimate and searing memoir, the New York Times bestselling author Roxane Gay addresses the experience of living in a body that she calls wildly undisciplined. She casts an insightful and critical eye over her childhood, teens, and 20s, including the devastating act of violence that was a turning point in her young life, and brings readers into the present and the realities, pains, and joys of her daily life. Published in 2017 by HarperCollins, Roxane Gay was born in 1974 in Omaha, Nebraska. She is an American writer, professor, editor, and social commentator, best known for the books Hunger, Bad Feminist, Ayiti, Difficult Women, Untamed State, and much, much more. File this one under 306.46 for personal health. Debbie, please tell us about your relationship with Hunger by Roxane Gay.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this is when I first felt this tremendous soul connection to Roxane and found it rather mysterious that somehow she had captured so many of my own emotions and responses after a different but also similar act of violence. And so I felt as if we were kindred spirits in reading, and as she was healing through her journey in the book, I felt that it was helping me heal as well. Just her perspective and her resilience and her tenacity, her intelligence just felt so important to understand and witness that it just seared into my spirit. It sounds kind of strange, but that's really what it felt like. And then I reached out to her about being on the podcast because I thought this would be a remarkable conversation to have, albeit somewhat terrifying. And I asked her to be on the show, and she initially said yes, and then went on her Hunger book tour. Her publicist ended up not getting back to me, even though Roxane had asked me to reach out to her, and I forwarded that request to the publicist so she would know I wasn't fibbing. And ultimately, when she got back from her publicity tour, her publicist ended up leaving HarperCollins, and then I wrote Roxane again, having not ever heard back from her. And at that point, Roxane was exhausted from the tour and ultimately turned me down. But I kept writing her about the book.
So the book came out in 2017. Was this in 2017 that she turned you down?
Yeah, 2000. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think, yes, because I wrote her, I believe, in June of 2017. And by the time she finished the tour and was back and answering emails, it was probably 5-6 months later, because I had tried for several months to reach the publicist to no avail. And so having then gotten a bounce back that she was no longer at the company, I figured I'd try to reach out to Roxane again and show her my efforts, but ask her if she'd consider scheduling with me directly, and which point she did turn me down. And, you know, the book was so important to me and so impactful to me that I wrote her a couple of times, just quoting different things that she had said in the book and writing her about that. And I don't know that she ever wrote me back. And then a year later, I was talking with Ashley Ford, and Ashley helped make the magic happen by putting in a good word for me, because at that point I did really feel that I had a crush on her, and it was more than just being in love with the book. And Ashley helped facilitate that date, and the rest, as you might say, is history.
Well, I really appreciate you opening that up for us and sharing how, I don't know if the word is tenacious, but you had written all these emails and not heard back repeatedly. And that's a beautiful part of a love story, right? When one person's like, I keep thinking there's something there. And then after the date, I heard Roxane say on Brené's podcast, I was like, damn, she's hot.
It was only after she met me. She didn't Google me before our date. I don't know why, but she didn't Google me. And so she had no idea what I looked like. And when I went and met her after an event that she did at Symphony Space, she was looking at each person that came up to her in the signing line, wondering if it was me, and sometimes hoping it wasn't. And then when she finally, I purposely was the last person online. I kept giving up my place as the stragglers came to join the signing line. So yeah, I don't know why she didn't Google me, but she didn't.
Did she know you were you also came out fairly recently, if I have it right? Like she had come out at a very young age.
It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years now. I came out, almost 10 years. I came out, actually it's 10 years. I came out when I was 50. And so I don't think she knew anything about me, frankly. I don't think she knew anything at all. I think she was just surprised that somebody was sort of so consistently showing up and persisting in trying to connect in some way. I think she was sort of puzzled by me.
Yeah. Well, it's a beautiful story. And I heard that, Gloria Steinem was going to marry you.
I know.
You had a 400+ person wedding plan that got postponed from 10/10/20 to 10/11/21. And then with COVID and everything, you eventually eloped, I believe.
Yeah, we did. We eloped.
And so much of this book jumps out to me. I mean, it's just an incredible feat of artistic achievement. I can completely see why you were mesmerized by it. Of course, not on the level. I didn't even relate to the things around abuse and so on. But one of the things you said was that there's a line in this book that stunned you, I believe, which is this one. I was a gaping wound of need. I couldn't admit this to myself, but there was a pattern of intense emotional masochism, of throwing myself into the most dramatic relationships possible, of needing to be a victim of some kind over and over and over. In chapter 18 of this podcast, David Sedaris told us, I obviously have some hole in my life. Like comedians or actors, I have some deep neediness that needs to be filled. I need to be loved. I need to be approved of. It's a naked, almost pathetic need. And I wondered if you could talk to that need, which I also share with you and Roxane and David. How do we navigate these holes in our life?
Well, I think it probably comes from the way we were brought up. I don't know that it necessarily comes from any love partner. I think that we are imprinted very early with our psychological makeup and our experiences then further that. So many of us have abandonment issues for whatever reason. I once had an ex tell me I was a bottomless pit of need. Very poetic. And he was right. He was absolutely right back in the days when I was dating men. So I think that came from and comes from wanting so badly to be filled up where we feel depleted or insufficient. And I've dealt with that pretty much my whole life. And initially, I think we connect with others that have that same need and then sort of reciprocate. But that becomes codependency, and that ends up becoming really toxic. I think that the intention is really noble, but I think the behavior is really damaging. And then ultimately, I think we have to find a way to do that for ourselves without sounding too self-helpy or corny. But I think until you can sort of self-soothe that gaping wound, no one else is going to be able to do it for you. Again, because we metabolize those external experiences. And this is so deeply internal that I think we have to figure out how to self-regulate in a way that allows us to accept somebody as is without a requirement that they heal us.
I love that. And the reason I asked David this is because I was asking him why he toured every spring and every fall when he's kind of clearly like made it, you know, from any perspective, artistically, financially, commercially, whatever. And that's what he answered this question. When you said we have to self-soothe the whole ourselves, are there, I know you've talked so openly, and it's been really wonderful for the world of therapy, how open you've been about your own journey with therapy. 5 times a week for 3 years, 4 times a week for years after that, and then 3 times a week for decades after that. In addition to therapy, is there anything else that has been part of your self-soothing journey?
I think just acknowledging my shame and not being so secretive about it. Because what I found shameful, I think other people profoundly have connected to because they have those experiences as well. You know, when you hide these things, they just fester and not necessarily sort of dumping it into someone else, but just the acknowledgement that these things happen. You know, if what I've said has helped other people consider therapy, then that is an extraordinary thing. And that helps other people see that they can be helped. So, but initially that wasn't even the reason why. It was just the understanding in myself that I no longer felt the need to be secretive about things because that shame had dissipated. And I would say that it's not fully gone, but it's certainly diluted significantly.
You know, when you talk about it like that, I'm sort of picturing this festering thing being exposed to light, you know, and light sort of helping to cure or to, you know, I had that experience when I gave a talk more than 10 years ago, even just talking about my divorce, which, you know, but then, like you said, the bounce back you get helps reconfirm your decision to do that and show you other people that have been there. And then, you know, you move forward with your head held a bit higher.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that what feels so overwhelmingly shameful does allow you to reconsider what shame means. I felt the same way after my second divorce. I was married once in my 20s, once in my 30s. Now I'm approaching 60, just recently got married again. I think that when I got divorced the second time, I felt like such a failure. I was ashamed to take off my rings. I was 38, I'd already been divorced twice, and I just felt like the biggest loser. And it felt so real, Neil. I felt so ashamed of who I was and so damaged. And I look back on that now and I think, you know, first of all, I wasn't the only person that went through 2 divorces. Second of all, I had absolutely no role models for a happy marriage growing up, so there was no way for me to know how to do it. And the idea that I would be so ashamed of just taking off my wedding ring just because of what that would mean about me is heartbreaking in retrospect. And I have so much sort of empathy for that state of mind, but also find it kind of ridiculous that is what I felt such a failure over. But, you know, that's just the way time works, I guess.
I so appreciate you sharing that. And you have become this beacon in the world, honestly, and so many of these issues because you are talking openly about them. And it's wonderful. It really, really is helping people. One thing about Roxane as well, because we're talking about her book, she calls herself a workaholic. And
I'm sorry, a what?
she calls herself a workaholic. And in fact, in an essay about you called Getting to Know You, Getting to Know All About You, she called you a workaholic as well.
Yeah, I am.
And how do we learn to slow down?
Well, if the times haven't done it, I'm not sure that anything will.
Well, are you a workaholic post-pandemic?
Yeah, I am. I use work as a way to feel, I use productivity as a way to feel valuable as a human. And that's been a lifelong issue, all the way back to like high school and the 43 clubs I belong to and so forth.
Yeah, we interviewed George Saunders in chapter 75 of this podcast, and he used something along the lines of, well, if I haven't changed now, I'm not gonna, so I'm okay with it. And he's in his early 60s, but as I'm 42, and so I'm asking to try to solve something that maybe it's just never gonna solve.
Well, I mean, Jocelyn Glei in her great podcast, Hurry Slowly, asks the question, who are we if we don't produce? And it's a rhetorical question that I think everybody should consider, but it's hard because what is your answer to that? You know, for me, it's like, you know, a lump of nothing. And Roxane is, as an observer and a witness to my whole life now, has said every time I do achieve something, I just raise the bar higher and don't really ever get to appreciate what it is that I might have done. And as a result, I've become really interested in how long the feeling of accomplishment lasts for people. I started a column on printmag.com, wherein I ask that question as part of a whole series of questions. How long does the feeling of success and accomplishment last? And I think across the board, people are like from like 2 minutes to 2 hours. I don't even think anybody's said like 2 days.
Yeah.
It seems to be something that, I don't know if it's because it's dopamine driven, but it does not seem to be a long-lasting feeling. At least, you know, when people first fall in love, that fluttery, happy feeling generally lasts about 18 months. We don't even get like a fraction of that for success,
right?
and achievement. And it's so interesting, and I think somebody needs to examine this.
Well, also, you know, the world, like, I wrote down some of these questions that you asked your students kind of as they're, looking for jobs. And these are questions you said that you ask. Am I constantly refining and improving my skills? What can I continue to get better and more competitive at? Do I believe I am working harder than everybody else? If not, what can and should I be doing to do that? And it's not, I picked at those questions a little bit, maybe, you know, smiling while doing so, because it's the world itself that's moving the sticks. You know, what used to be the equivalent of getting your bachelor's or whatever is now your master's, and that'll be your PhD. And there is this, Mark Manson, our guest in chapter 28, author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, says you have to live above the API now. And the API is always increasing, which means the level of artificial intelligence that humans are ultimately competing against for most work, it's increasing all the time. And if you cannot be ahead of it, you have very little value, which is part of that suffocating feeling that I think a lot of us share. I know you interviewed Johnny Sun recently on Design Matters, and he talks about this, right? The fate of those who are confined to a world where they are nothing if they are not productive.
Yeah.
And you say someone needs to examine it, and I've got you for a few minutes. So let's just pause on this for a second, because it does feel like a nugget that a lot of us are wrestling with. When I was a kid and people used to get up at the wedding and say some nice words about so-and-so, they'd say, she's a great sister, she's a great mother, she's a great friend. You know, now I almost always hear pedigrees being described in terms of things like roles in companies, or it's something my wife and I struggle with, because my wife Leslie is at home with our children, and she's a public school teacher, and she's amazing at everything she does. But in our world today, she's not given the glamour, whatever you call it, that I'm given, and you're writing a column for Print Mag here. What are some of the values shifts that you think are needed, and how might we go about orienting ourselves towards what really matters more?
Well, I think our addiction to social media is probably fueling a lot of that, where everything is about positioning and projecting a certain kind of image. And I think that can be really damaging to more soulful experiences. People tend to be far less willing to share their real selves, their real emotions. And I don't really have an answer about how to, in any way, begin to change that. What I can offer is that I don't think that people are really addicted to the devices per se. I think that they're addicted to the feelings that they get through the devices.
Yeah, pushing the lever for the pebble.
But a lot of it is that, again, that dopamine hit of being followed, being liked, being shared, being seen. And because it's so dopamine driven, it's very temporal. And I don't think anybody ever comes away from Instagram after 30 minutes scrolling feeling really good about themselves.
That's for sure.
But yet we do it anyway. And so I don't really have any way of understanding that better than what I've just described, or really recommending other than step away from the phone.
Yeah.
But I'm in the same boat. I still do it, and I still regret the time that I spend on social media most days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I know Tim talks about this as well, but I've deleted all the apps from my access points. I haven't deleted my actual platforms, but I've deleted all my ways to get in as a first step. But then, of course, I feel FOMO, Debbie.
Yeah.
Okay, let's take that great little piece of wisdom you left us with and transition it now into a work full of much more wisdom, which is called The Voice That Is Great Within Us, American Poetry of the 20th Century. This book was edited by Hayden Carruth, if I pronounced that right, Carruth, published in 1970 by Bantam Books. The cover is like a large flower collage with petals made of black, red, white, and orange images. It is the only image on the cover. Top white is got the title and subtitle in a sort of very narrow sans serif font, or typeface, whichever you prefer. Hayden Carruth is an American poet, literary critic, and anthologist who taught at Syracuse University. This poetry anthology includes works of Robert Frost, Ezra Pound, E.E. Cummings, Sylvia Plath, and many, many more. You can file this one under 811.5 for American Poetry Anthologies. Debbie, please tell us about your relationship with The Voice That Is Great Within Us, American Poetry of the 20th Century.
It's a beautiful book. I've had the copy that I own for 40-something years. The covers come off. The spine is pretty much broken. It's in several pieces, actually, the book. But it contains some of my all-time favorite poetry. This is the book that I discovered Charles Olson in. And Charles Olson's poem, Maximus to Himself, is really my all-time favorite poem. That is it for me. There is no other poem that matters as much to me as that one. And the fact that I discovered it in this book is part of why it matters so much to me.
You don't happen to have the book near you, do you, by chance?
I don't have it near me, but okay. I have the vision near me.
No. I asked you because I've heard you read that poem before, and I picked out a few lines from it.
I can read it. First of all, I know a lot of it by heart, but I can find it easily via Google.
Great.
Because it is. I actually have another book of poetry with that poem in it, but nearby, but not in my sound studio. Maximus. We even named our dog Maximus because of this.
Oh, wow. Well, I'd love to hear you read it. And then I'd love to ask you how you interpret the poem, because I've read it about 12 times and I'm still thinking about the interpretation.
Okay. You want me to read it?
Yeah,
I have it right in front of me. Okay. It's one of my favorite things to do, to read this poem. Maximus to Himself by Charles Olson. I have had to learn the simplest things last, which made for difficulties. Even at sea, I was slow to get the hand out or to cross a wet deck. The sea was not finally my trade, but even my trade at it, I stood estranged from that which was most familiar, was delayed and not content with the man's argument that such postponement is now the nature of obedience, that we are all late in a slow time, that we grow up many and the single is not easily known. It could be, though the sharpness, the achiote, I note in others makes more sense than my own distances. The agilities, they show daily who do the world's businesses and who do nature's, as I have no sense I have done either. I have made dialogues, have discussed ancient texts, have thrown what light I could, offered what pleasures docete allows. But the known, this I have had to be given, a life, love, and from one man, the world. Tokens. But sitting here, I look out as a wind and water man testing and missing some proof. I know the quarters of the weather, where it comes from, where it goes, but the stem of me, this I took from their welcome or their rejection of me, and my arrogance was neither diminished nor increased by the communication. It is undone business I speak of this morning, with the sea stretching out from my feet.
It's an incredible poem. So much complexity and layers in there, and you read it so beautifully. What does that poem mean to you? Everything.
That we grow up many and the single is not easily known. I mean, we're all questing to be known. The agilities, they show daily who do the world's businesses and who do nature's, as I have no sense I have done either. I mean, how often do we feel like we just don't fit in any place? Mm-hmm. But the known, this I have had to be given, a life, love, and from one man, the world. I sit missing some proof. I know the quarters of the weather, where it comes from, where it goes. But the stem of me, who I am, this I took from their welcome or their rejection of me being accepted. And my arrogance was neither diminished nor increased by the communication. Narcissism. And then it is undone business I speak of this morning, with the sea stretching out from my feet. The undone business of living.
It's beautiful. It's a wonderful, wonderful poem. It helps make sense of so many things. The quotes that you picked out were the ones I wrote down too. I have had to learn the simplest things last, but even at my trade, right? That's so, I mean, don't we always feel like the thing we just learned, no matter how old we are? It's like, oh my gosh, how do I not know that?
Yeah. Yep. And even the way that the poem looks. So for the listeners, the first line of the poem is, I've had to learn the simplest things. And then the next line starts with the word last. And that's another thing I love about poetry, is that just the way the lines break is so visual. It's just so, it's a stunning, stunning poem. I actually think that poetry is really the highest art form. And I think this is evidence of that.
Yeah, David Mitchell calls them the apex predators of the literary world. You have this other book that you've mentioned a few times called Pattern Recognition. And when I think about poetry, I do think it appeals to this part of our brain that is maybe more subconscious. A quote that you have mentioned from Pattern Recognition I wanted to read back to you is, what we think of as mind is only a sort of jumped up gland, piggybacking on the reptilian brainstem and the older mammalian mind. But it is our culture that tricks us into recognizing it as all of consciousness. The mammalian spreads continent-wide beneath it, mute and muscular, attending its ancient agenda.
William Gibson at his finest.
At his finest, absolutely. And on this theme of poetry, you said the highest art form, appealing to our wider mind, helping make sense of things. I want to steal a question of yours that you asked Chris Ware. Has your work, Debbie, helped you make sense of anything? And if so, what has it helped you make sense of?
Well, I think the first thing that I would think of is the work that I do with the Joyful Heart Foundation. And this was really the question that Tim Ferriss posed to me, a similar question when I first started talking about my history. He asked me why on the Joyful Heart Foundation. I said that work made my life make sense. And it was because of the branding work that I do for them, the advocacy work I continue to do. But at the time, when I was first beginning my work with Mariska Hargitay and the Joyful Heart Foundation, it was really about designing a new logo and creating a new visual brand for the foundation. And the fact that I was able to understand the specific issues that Joyful Heart Foundation was working to eradicate all sexual violence with particular attention to domestic violence, sexual assault, child abuse, and the rape kit backlog. I felt that doing that work and having this expertise made my life make sense. It was almost a full circle of healing trauma through advocacy and activism.
That work that you do is phenomenal. I am going to add more information on the foundation and on the Rape Kit Backlog to both our show notes and to my commentary before and after this interview, so that people can learn more. But to help close us off, Debbie, from this rich and wonderful wisdom-filled conversation, thank you. I was expecting the wisdom from you, and I absolutely got it. I thought we would finish off the last couple of minutes with just a few fast money round questions about reading and books, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, number one, hardcover, paperback, audio, or e?
Hardcover.
Okay, you do want to expand on why?
I just like the feel of a big, fat book.
Hence why Design Matters is the biggest, fattest hardcover I have on my shelf.
Yeah,
it's
sorry
right up
about
there
that.
No. It's right up there with the Almanac of Charlie Munger on my shelf as like the biggest, thickest. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful, stunning, beautiful book. I am going to be buying many copies of this for many people. It's just,
thank you.
It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And,
thank you.
And the foreword and the introduction by Tim Ferriss and Roxane Gay and the after by Maria Popova. Oh my gosh, I had to look up about 20 words from in there.
Yeah.
It was stunning. And she talks about the power of the interview and freezing time. And it's just beautiful. Number two, nice natural segue. How do you organize your books on your bookshelf?
By author, but no other technique.
I like that. Alphabetical last name by author, pure all the way through.
Yes.
Very easy to find. Wonderful. Do you have a white whale book or a book that you have been chasing the longest or which has perhaps defeated you in some way?
Tolstoy's War and Peace. I minored in Russian literature in college and just had a hard time. People say you're either a Dostoevsky person or a Tolstoy person, Brecht or Beckett. And I was able to do both Brecht and Beckett, but not Tolstoy. But I would say War and Peace or Anna Karenina.
Nice. Okay. Wonderful books. I have also read neither, although I just read my very first ever Tolstoy in preparation for another guest we had on the show, George Saunders. Number four, do you have a favorite bookstore, living or dead?
Books of Wonder.
Where is that?
In Chelsea, in Manhattan.
Oh, nice. Wonderful. You know, it's nice to get a New York City bookstore that's not the Strand, which so many people say.
Books of Wonder. It's a magnificent bookstore.
Wonderful, beautiful. And to close us off, Debbie, I know you said we talked about productivity and accomplishment and ambition, but from many outside perspectives, including mine, you really have seemingly done it all. You are one of the world's foremost designers. You are on a number of foundations and charities. You are a teacher. You are a podcaster, one of the world's foremost interviewers. For those listening who may aspire to achieving some semblance of artistic success, however they define it, and they listen to you for clues or ideas or thoughts or wisdom, is there one final hard-fought piece of wisdom you might share to those three bookers out there listening to you right now?
Expect anything worthwhile to take a long time.
Thank you so much for coming on 3 Books.
Neil, thank you so much. You are just a dreamboat. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey everybody, this is just me, just Neil again, hanging out in my basement with my backpack full of wires, listening back to the wisdom oozing out of every pore of Miss Debbie Millman. Oh, what a treat. What a pleasure to hang out with Debbie like that, swirl brains with her. This woman who has collected wisdom in a way through her podcast. 500 interviews, has a tendency to do that. Plus, she's lived a lot of life with a lot of roles, a lot of decades in different positions, on a lot of boards, on a lot of charities. She's doing a lot of work on the rape backlog. I mean, who's even heard of that before I heard about it from Debbie? If you haven't already done so, her conversations with Tim Ferriss are just astounding. Back in 2017, where she first discusses her sexual assault that she experienced as a child, incessant, kind of constant sexual assault at the hands of stepfathers and boyfriends and so on. And then she gets into like more public sphere, you know, coming out of the closet at age 50, developing this incredible relationship with Roxane, getting married to Roxane Gay over the pandemic. I mean, don't you feel like the next few decades, everything's going to come up Debbie? I kind of get the sense she has laid so much foundational groundwork to just living a beautiful, beautiful life. And I believe she is doing just that. Debbie, thank you so much for the gifts of wisdom you've given us. I picked out a ton of quotes. Here's a few I leave for you. How many more stages in one's life do you get where it's absolutely okay to sort of fall flat on your face with really very little ramification other than maybe a bruised ego? She was talking about college students, and you know what I think about? I was like, how do I get to that place more often? How do I take a risk with this book or with this with a podcast chapter or with changing things around more often so that I don't really lose too much? I mean, part of why I have no ads, no sponsors, no commercials on the show is because I don't want to be beholden to people with paychecks, to be having to say, oh yeah, I'm always 45 minutes in length and we always put an ad right in the middle, right when people are getting to the juicy. Screw that. You know, I don't want to be, I want to have less risk tied to the show. Okay. I don't want to be thinking too much about that stuff. But it's a great reminder. And maybe it's a place to aspire to get to after you've achieved success as well. How about this one? Regret is not an emotion that can be metabolized. Had you ever heard that sentence before? I had not. She says, to expand, we can metabolize grief. We can metabolize love. We metabolize hunger when we eat. We metabolize all sorts of things, but we don't metabolize regret because there's no closure. Do you agree with that? I kind of feel like I maybe don't agree with that. I know that doesn't sound good, but it's like, I feel like you can metabolize regret. I feel like you can maybe metabolize it through therapy, through journaling, through trying to envisioning, the alternate realities that you may or may not have experienced, through literature, I think you can process regret. I know you can certainly bury it or hide it and things like that, but what do you think? 1-833-READ-A-LOT. Always feel free to give me a call and let me know what you think. How about this one? I use productivity to feel valuable as a human. This is coming from a woman in her 6th, maybe 7th, almost decade of life. And she's putting down as a stamp, I use productivity to feel valuable as a human. You know I gave those questions to Debbie that she asked her students, right? Are you doing as much as anybody else could possibly be? I mean, they're kind of anxiety-provoking in a way. But also, she is very astutely opening up and sharing with us that this is kind of how people feel today. By the way, if you're hearing like printer noises in the background, that would be my wife incessantly printing stuff upstairs down to the basement printer. Free printer noises in the background in every chapter of 3 books. I use productivity to feel valuable as a human. I feel like I can very much relate to that one. Thank you so much to Ms. Debbie Millman for giving us 3 more books to add to our top 1,000, including number 713, Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabrielle Garcia Marquez, a.k.a. Gabbo. That would be Gabbo's second book. Okay. After The Innocent Arendina that we talked about way back in chapter, was it 69? 79 with Judy Morales. Number 712, Hunger by Roxane Gay. I mean, can you imagine reading a book by an author, falling in love with the author, and then marrying them? I mean, that is a very, I feel like you could make a movie of that, you know? And then you got the backstory scenes and the black and white images of Roxane and Debbie's childhood and this wedding that was supposed to be conducted by Gloria Steinem. I mean, you could go deep on this one. We went as deep as we could go with the time we had, but there's more there. Read Hunger by Roxane Gay if you're interested in exploring that. Number 711, The Voice That Is Great Within Us by Hayden Carrut, or Carrut, C-A-R-R-U-T. And of course, that is The Home. That was The Home. That was the poetry anthology that has her favorite poem in it. Also, I have a little note here that she was also thinking about picking Ulysses by James Joyce. I can't quite asterisk it because I don't think anyone else has said this yet. So Ulysses, we're going to pocket that. That was another book that Debbie was considering saying that we didn't actually have time to talk about. Thank you so much to Debbie for coming on 3 books. You are a dreamboat, Debbie, if you're listening. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. Are you still here? Did you make it? Are you here past the 3-second pause? If so, I want to welcome you back to the end of the podcast club. This is one of 3 podcast clubs we have on 3 books. You guys know about the Cover to Cover Club. You know about the Secret Club. 3 bookers of the world. We love you. We hang out. We play your phone calls. We read your letters, good or bad, and we talk about the word of the chapter. Let's kick over to the phone now. Here we go.
Hey there, Neil. Fellow Canadian here. My name is Miguel Sa, and I'm actually in Toronto, right downtown on Bloor. A little fun fact about me is I do high-rise condo construction, and I'm currently building a 53-story building on Yonge and Bloor. So if you're ever near there, know there's a construction worker likely listening to one of your podcasts. I've been doing my best to be a part of the Cover to Cover Club and have been loving the journey. It's also been a journey through the city of Toronto, having discovered numerous businesses from your interview with the owners and operators, like Hard Feelings, which is actually just down the street from me. And don't listen to all the haters. I enjoy your ad libs. This quest you have made is a long journey. We're all on together. And so you making personal only imbues the podcast with more relatability and authenticity. I'm surprised you haven't had The Prophet by Khalil Gibran make it onto the list yet, with it having been a big book during the 60s, counterculture, and just a beloved book by many. It's one of my all-time favorites and would recommend it to all of your listeners. And in the spirit of the interview you just released, the less you say, the more likely they are to hear it. And it's a short book and very succinct. But I hope you're enjoying the change of seasons here in Canada. Thank you for making one of my all-time favorite podcasts. And I'm looking forward to this journey of finding the 1,000 most formative books.
Thank you so much to Miguel from Toronto, my hometown. It's been a long time since we played a voicemail from Toronto. And I just love that visual of Miguel up building a 53-story tower. That's a lot of stories, 53 stories. Imagine living 53 stories above the ground. I mean, I can't imagine. I just can't even imagine that. I mean, I go up really high sometimes, you know, in a big tower, CN Tower, of course, tallest freestanding structure in, I was going to say the world, but I think it's number 2 now after the Burj over in Dubai. And I look down and I'm like, you know, I sort of feel that, like, you know, I don't know what the dizziness almost, like the vertiginous feeling. Does it go away if you live up there? Is it like people that like work in a bakery? Do you ever get sick of the smell? You know, that's what I want to know. Anyway, Miguel, I'm picturing you up there listening to 3 books. I'm loving the scene. And The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Oh, I have news for you. It has just been picked. It has just been picked, okay? You're really the first person to pick it, Miguel. Now a guest is going to pick it second. I won't tell you who the guest is, and I won't tell you more about it, but it's coming. It's coming, and I'm sure that's going to get a few asterisks before 2031 as well. Okay, and now it is time for the letter of the chapter. And this chapter's letter comes to us from David Q. from San Pedro, California. It comes to us in the old-fashioned way, an actual letter. I'm holding a white crinkly envelope. Can you hear me crinkling it? And it is crinkly. It's got like water marks on it. The envelope is the size and shape of a Christmas card. It's got a circular poinsettia logo in the top right. David's name and address is written in the top left from San Pedro, California. My name and address is written in the middle in like a black, kind of thin felt tip pen that's got nice smudges on it. My address, by the way, is at the bottom of all my emails. I don't want a flood of letters necessarily, but if you're ever looking to send me something, there it is. It's at the bottom. If you get my monthly book club, that's probably my biggest email list. That you can see it. My address at the bottom. There's a stamp at the top from Los Angeles, California, 900. And at the bottom, there's a blue sticker that says United States Postal Service par avion airmail in like an italicized Arial narrow bolded type font. The back has a little seal of a cardinal and a blue jay and a black-capped chickadee hanging out on some holly. I rip open the envelope. I pull out the card. The card has also got a bird on it. So David, you know I'm a bird person. This is great. It's a picture of a western bluebird in a snowstorm. On the back, the card is made by Palm Press. So I open the card and it reads in a very thin, skinny, scribbly, I hope you don't mind me saying that, scribbly, almost illegible as all of our handwriting is these days, kind of font. Dear Neil, thank you for all that you do. I'm really enjoying the podcast. At the end of your podcast with Brené Brown, you were wondering what a group of words is called. That made me think of a book that I have called An Exaltation of Larks. And I just love how David capitalized every word and underlined it. Don't you remember when you had to write a title and you had to underline the title? And also he spelled larks wrong and then scribbled it out and wrote it again. An Exaltation of Larks by James Lipton. It was recommended to me by some friends who are birders. Are you familiar with the book? ? No, I'm not. If not, it has group names for things, including birds. Here are some examples. A party of jays, a parliament of owls, an improbability of puffins. That's a great one. A piddle of puppies, a woke of vultures, a prickle of porcupines. Anyways, there are group names for people, animals, and things. Here are 2 more library-related group names. A shush of librarians, I love that, and a trove of libraries. They are fitting, ! I love that, a shush of librarians. You ever see a group of librarians hanging out together? Oh, there's an old shush. If you ever said that in a sentence in real life, I would give you a virtual high five from Toronto, okay? Back to the letter. Okay, one more related to your podcast with Chris Hadfield. A group of astronauts is called a trajectory. Trajectory of astronauts. Who comes up with these things? I really enjoyed that chapter, by the way. I also really enjoyed the chapter with Zafar, the hamburger man. Oh, Zafar, I love him. I hope you enjoyed the holidays, and I wish you and your family the best in 2022. I always look forward to a new moon and a full moon and a new chapter. Sincerely, David. Oh, David, I love you. Thank you so much. By the way, stamped in the middle of this big blank card is Happy Holidays in a bright red. This is beautiful. I keep a big pile of all the fan mail I've ever got. And, back in the day, I want to say 2010, 2011, 2012, I was starting to get dozens of books of awesome, homemade books of awesome from Mrs. Kelly's Portable 2 in New Hampshire or whatever. And I kept them all. And sometimes I flip back through them and I find the most bizarre things. I was flipping back through an old book of awesome, a handmade book of awesome. So it's not my book of awesome, but someone else's. And it was hiding things in your friend's afro. And I couldn't stop laughing. I was like, That's the beauty of it. Okay, a little secret. I'm actually working right now. I don't know if it's going to come out. I hope it is. I'm working right now on a new book called The Book of Awesome New Testament. And in it, I'm kind of wondering if I should include essays from people. So if you have an awesome thing, oh my gosh, this might open send it to me. Email me your awesome entry. I'm trying to find some more for the new book. Okay. And now it is time for the word of the chapter. For this chapter's word, let's go back to Miss Debbie Millman.
I think I just have a knack of picking well.
Yes, indeed. The word is knack.
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 K-N-A-C-K. Google says a knack is an acquired or natural skill at performing a task. Let's head over to Merriam-Webster, who's usually a little bit more precise. They've been doing the dictionary thing since 1828, after all. They say, number one, a special ready capacity that is hard to analyze or teach. Second definition, a clever trick or stratagem, if I'm saying that right, or a clever way of doing something. There is also an archaic definition, meaning an ingenious device. Can we analyze this word a little bit more from a synonym perspective? How about gift? Often implying a special favor by God or nature. Faculty, applying to an innate or less often acquired ability for a particular accomplishment or function. Aptitude, implying a natural liking or for some activity and the likelihood of a success at it. A bent, I love that one, bent, nearly equal to aptitude but stresses inclination more than specific ability. Interesting. Talent, we know that one, suggests a marked natural ability that needs to be developed. Genius, suggesting an impressive inborn creative ability. And of course, let's get back to knack again, implies a comparatively minor but special ability making for ease and dexterity in performance, i.e. the knack of getting along. She has a knack of telling interesting stories. The jazz musician has a knack for improvisation. But where did this word come from? Truth of the matter is, we don't know. We don't know. In the mid-14th century, that word, knack, K-N-A-C-K, was used as a deception, a trick, or a device from uncertain origin. Some people think it's from the Low Germanic onomatopoeic word for a sharp-sounding blow. Okay, so a knack is just the sound of a sharp-sounding blow. But that's not the word we're talking about. And then it says, over on Etym Online, the history of etymology of all these words, is maybe the sense of special skill, which is first recorded in the 1580s, is in fact a different word altogether. By the way, interesting to mention here that in the 18th and 19th century, so 200, 300 years ago, knacky, a whole other word that we don't use anymore, knacky meant full of knacks, ingenious, dexterous. Well. Knack. Not to be confused with knick-knack, which is a pleasing trifle or a toy. 1570s repudiation of knack. No, it's not a knick-knack. We're talking knack, K-N-A-C-K. Just as a reminder, we're talking about a special ready capacity, hard to analyze or teach. Very similar, but not the same as gift, faculty, aptitude, bent, talent, or genius. We don't know where the word came from, but we think, a knacky show. We think Debbie Millman is knacky in the best sense of the word. We think you, all three bookers out there listening to the end of the Cover to Covery Club, end of the chapter club. Oh my gosh, I'm getting all my clubs mixed up. At the end of chapter 97, oh my, you're knacky. I'm knacky. We're knacky together. Until next time, everybody, on chapter 98, let's remember that you are what you eat and you are what you read. Thank you for the knacky hangout, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.